My husband put his insurance on his mother's name. I am 29 years old, a Muslim woman, and I find myself in a difficult place where I need advice. Life has always been a little challenging, but lately, I feel like I'm being pulled in directions I cannot understand. English is not my first language, so I hope you will bear with me as I try to put my thoughts into words. It's not easy for me to share this story, but my heart feels so heavy, and I'm struggling to make sense of what's happening in my marriage. My husband and I have been married for 2 years now. 2 years, it sounds like such a short time, doesn't it? Yet, within this period, I feel like I've lived through experiences that some couples may only encounter after decades. I often find myself wondering if what I'm going through is normal, if I'm expecting too much, or if something is deeply wrong. The doubts haunt me during the quiet hours of the night, filling my mind with questions I can't answer alone. When we first got married, everything seemed perfect, or at least, I told myself it was. My husband, who is 34 years old, gave me a necklace as a wedding gift. It was a beautiful piece, one I cherished deeply. I remember holding it in my hands, running my fingers over the delicate chain, and feeling like it was a promise of something solid and unbreakable between us. It symbolized the start of our new life together, and I clung to it during those initial weeks when everything was new and overwhelming. But the necklace did not stay with me for long. One day, not long after our wedding, his mother visited us. She admired the necklace, running her fingers over it with an expression that was hard to read. Was it longing, or entitlement? She casually mentioned how much she liked it, and before I knew what was happening, my husband handed it to her. "You can have it, Mama," he said, his tone affectionate and resolute. I was too shocked to say anything. I just stood there, watching her take the necklace that was supposed to be mine, her smile whitening as if it had always belonged to her. When I finally found the courage to ask him about it, he brushed my concerns aside. "Don't worry," he said with a reassuring smile that felt hollow, "I'll buy you another one." But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years, and that promise remained unfulfilled. He never replaced the necklace, and over time, I stopped expecting him to. It felt like one of many small sacrifices I was expected to make without question, as though my needs were secondary, invisible. Recently, I discovered something else that left me deeply unsettled. I found out that 70% of his work life insurance is in his mother's name, and only 30% is in mine. This information came to me by chance, during a casual conversation when he mentioned it offhand, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. My heart sank as I processed his words. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked him why, but his response was curt. "She needs it more than you do." The words stung like a slap. We don't have children yet, and his mother is already well supported by his 2 brothers, who seem to be doing well financially. I, on the other hand, have no one else. I fully depend on him. My family is not in a position to help me, and I'm working hard to become independent, but that day feels so far away. Knowing that the majority of his life insurance would go to his mother, when I am the one building a life with him, left me feeling unimportant, like a mere afterthought in his plans. I couldn't stop myself from questioning his reasoning. "But your brothers already support her," I said, trying to make him see my perspective. His response was dismissive, almost patronizing. "You don't understand. She's my mother. I owe her everything. You'll be fine." But would I be fine? That's the question that keeps echoing in my mind. I try to remind myself that he's a good son, that family is important, and that taking care of one's parents is a virtue in our culture. But where do I fit into this picture? Am I being unreasonable for wanting to feel like a priority, like an equal partner in this marriage? Or am I selfish for questioning his choices? I often feel like I'm living in the shadows of his mother and his brothers, constantly compared to them, constantly reminded of what I lack. It's exhausting. I want to believe that our relationship can improve, that these are just growing pains in a young marriage, But every time I try to bring up my feelings, I'm met with indifference or defensiveness. My faith teaches me to be patient, to persevere, and to compromise, but I wonder how much compromise is too much. Am I losing myself in the process? These thoughts weigh heavily on my heart, and I don't know where to turn. Perhaps someone can help me understand, are these struggles normal in a marriage, or is something fundamentally wrong here? I feel so alone, so unheard. Is this what love is supposed to feel like? I am studying hard to build a future for myself, a future where I can stand on my own 2 feet. It's not easy, balancing the demands of my coursework with everything else that weighs on me. My dream is to become independent, to no longer feel like my life is at the mercy of someone else's decisions. But even this pursuit feels like a battle I'm fighting alone. My husband contributes little to my education, leaving me to shoulder more than half of the fees myself. He gives me a monthly allowance of €100, but it comes with conditions that make me question if it's worth calling it support at all. Every euro is scrutinized. If I dare to spend any of it on something as basic as food for myself, he deducts the amount without a second thought. "You are being wasteful," he says, his tone sharp and accusatory, as though my attempt to take care of my own needs is an affront to him. I've learned to tread carefully, keeping track of every cent, fearful of the inevitable lecture that follows any perceived misstep. It feels like I am a child being reprimanded for asking for pocket money, not a wife who deserves respect and dignity. The allowance, small as it is, never seems enough to cover everything. I've had to make difficult choices, cutting corners wherever I can, often sacrificing my own comfort to stretch the little I'm given. There are days when I skip meals or choose the cheapest options, all while pretending everything is fine. I've learned to mask my disappointment, my frustration, my growing resentment. I've learned to smile through it, hoping that someday things will change. But his lack of financial support isn't the worst of it. What truly cuts me to the core are his words. Words that mock, belittle, and diminish everything I do. "You do nothing at home," he says with a sneer, as though the endless hours I spend cooking, cleaning, and maintaining our home mean nothing. I wake up early to prepare his meals, ensure his clothes are always washed and ironed, and keep the house in order. Yet, none of it seems to matter to him. He dismisses my efforts as though they are inconsequential, something that should simply be expected of me. "You should be more like my mother," he often says, comparing me to a woman I've never met, who lives in another country. The comparisons are relentless, always pointing out my supposed shortcomings. "My mother would never complain like this," he'll say, or "she always knew how to manage things better." These words echo in my mind, each one chipping away at my confidence, making me question whether I am truly failing as a wife. How can I measure up to someone I don't even know? Someone who, in his eyes, seems to embody perfection. It feels like I am being pitted against an impossible standard, one I can never reach no matter how hard I try. I wonder if he sees me as a person at all, or just a reflection of what he believes a wife should be, a reflection that always falls short. I try to remind myself that I am doing my best, that I am juggling far more than many people could handle. But his words linger, casting a shadow over even my small victories. Sometimes I think he enjoys seeing me flustered, watching me scramble to prove myself. It's as if my struggles validate his belief that I am inadequate, that I will never measure up to the women he holds on a pedestal. I've tried talking to him, expressing how his words make me feel. But every attempt ends in the same way, with him brushing me off or turning the conversation back on me. "You're too sensitive," he says. "Why do you always make things about yourself?" He makes me feel guilty for having emotions, for wanting to be seen and heard. Over time, I've learned to stay quiet, bottling up my feelings because I know they'll be met with indifference or ridicule. There are moments when I wonder if he even loves me. Real love, I've always believed, is about partnership, about lifting each other up and sharing the burdens of life. But in this marriage, I feel more like an afterthought, a burden he tolerates rather than a partner he cherishes. It's a lonely place to be, feeling invisible in your own home, in your own relationship. Despite everything, I try to hold on to hope. Hope that once I finish my studies and start earning my own money, things will get better. Hope that independence will give me the strength to stand up for myself, to demand the respect I deserve. But even that hope feels fragile, overshadowed by the doubts that creep in during my weakest moments. Am I being too harsh in judging him? Is it possible that he doesn't realize how his actions affect me? I tell myself that perhaps he is under pressure too, that he's doing the best he can in his own way. But then I think of his words, his dismissiveness, his unwillingness to see my efforts, and I wonder if I am just making excuses for behavior that shouldn't be excused. I think about my family's advice: compromise, they say. Keep him happy. But at what cost? How much of myself am I supposed to compromise before there's nothing left of me? These questions haunt me, leaving me unsure of how to move forward. I often find myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversations and trying to make sense of it all. Is this really what marriage is supposed to be? A constant struggle to prove your worth, to earn the respect and love that should come freely? Or am I just expecting too much? The answers don't come easily, and the weight of uncertainty grows heavier each day. All I can do is keep moving forward, one step at a time, hoping that the future holds something brighter than this. But until then, I am stuck in this place of confusion and pain, trying to navigate a path that feels impossibly narrow. He rarely gives me gifts, and when he does, it's never truly about me. At first, I tried to convince myself that it wasn't about the value of the gift but the thought behind it. Surely, I reasoned, it was the gesture that mattered most. But even this comforting lie crumbled when I realized how little thought he actually put into his gifts. The few times he did give me something, it often felt like an afterthought, as if he was fulfilling a duty rather than expressing genuine affection. There was the watch, for instance, a sleek silver piece that I couldn't bring myself to like. I tried to hide my disappointment, not wanting to seem ungrateful, but he noticed. "If you don't like it, I'll just give it to someone who will," he said casually. And that's exactly what he did. A few days later, I saw the same watch on his sister's wrist. She thanked him profusely, gushing about his generosity, while I sat quietly, swallowing the bitterness that rose in my throat. It wasn't just the watch. There were other instances too: a perfume he later gave to his mother, a scarf he regifted to a friend. Each time, I felt like I was being erased, my feelings brushed aside as though they didn't matter. These moments left me questioning my place in his life. Was I not deserving of something that was just for me? Was it so much to ask for a little consideration, a little effort? Meanwhile, I spent most of the meager allowance he gave me on buying him gifts. It wasn't easy, but I wanted to show him how much I cared, to remind him that love should be about giving as much as receiving. I'd save up for weeks, cutting back on my own needs to afford something he might like: a leather wallet, a set of cufflinks, a book on a topic he once mentioned in passing. Each time, I handed over my carefully chosen gifts with a mixture of pride and hope, hoping to see a flicker of appreciation in his eyes. But his reactions were always lukewarm at best. He'd accept the gifts with a polite nod or a quick thanks, then move on as though they were nothing more than a fleeting distraction. He never asked how I managed to afford them, never noticed the sacrifices I made to bring a smile to his face. It felt one-sided, like I was pouring my heart into a well that could never be filled. His approach to gift-giving only reinforced this imbalance. He only ever bought me presents on my birthday, and even then, they felt obligatory rather than heartfelt. One year, he got me a wallet, which was practical but devoid of any personal touch. Another year, it was a blender. "You've been saying you wanted to try making smoothies," he said, as if that excused the lack of thought behind the gesture. There was no joy in these exchanges, no sense of celebration. Just another box checked off a list. When it came to small, spontaneous gifts, the kind that say, "I was thinking of you," he scoffed at the very idea. "Flowers are a waste of money," he told me once when I wistfully admired a bouquet at the market. His words felt like a door slamming shut on a part of me that longed for romance, for tenderness. I tried to tell myself that it didn't matter, that I didn't need flowers or chocolates to feel loved. But deep down, I couldn't shake the ache of wanting something simple, something that said, "You matter to me." I often wondered why I continued to put so much effort into giving when he so clearly didn't. Was it out of love, or was it desperation? Did I truly believe that my gifts could bridge the growing distance between us, or was I clinging to a hope that was already fading? I didn't know the answers, but I couldn't stop trying. It was as if I was trying to prove my worth through these gestures, to show him that I was deserving of the love and attention he so rarely gave. But every time my efforts were met with indifference, a little piece of my hope crumbled. I began to question whether I was being too demanding, whether my expectations were unrealistic. Was it fair to want more from him? Or was I chasing an ideal that didn't exist? My friends told me that gifts weren't the measure of a relationship, that what mattered was how we treated each other in our everyday lives. But even in the day-to-day, I felt invisible. It wasn't just about the gifts, it was about what they symbolized. Acknowledgement. Effort. Love. Without them, I felt like I was disappearing, fading into the background of a marriage that seemed more like a transaction than a partnership. On the rare occasions when I brought up how I felt, he dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand. "Why do you care about such small things?" he'd ask, his tone filled with irritation. "You're so materialistic." His words stung, leaving me questioning myself. Was I being shallow for wanting these gestures, or was he simply unwilling to see the emotional void his actions were creating? I tried to push these thoughts aside, telling myself that love wasn't about material things. But as the months turned into years, the weight of my unspoken feelings grew heavier. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of unmet expectations, clinging to the hope that someday, things would change. Until then, all I could do was keep giving, keep trying, and keep waiting for what? I wasn't even sure anymore. I am working tirelessly to finish my studies, pouring every ounce of energy I have into building a future where I can finally stand on my own. Each day is a small step toward independence, but the path is long and steep, and I often feel the weight of my circumstances pulling me down. I've learned to hide my exhaustion behind a smile, to bury my doubts beneath a layer of determination. But deep inside, I feel trapped, like a bird in a cage that's too small, unable to spread its wings. My parents, well-meaning as they are, advise me to compromise, to keep my husband happy. Marriage is about sacrifice, my mother tells me whenever I confide in her. Men can be difficult, but it's your job to make things work. Her words echo the lessons I've heard all my life, that a woman's strength lies in her ability to endure, to adapt, to keep the peace. But at what cost? I wonder, how much of myself am I supposed to give up before there's nothing left? I've tried to follow their advice, to be patient and understanding, to overlook the slights and focus on the positives. But as the months pass, I find it harder and harder to convince myself that this is normal, that this is how a marriage should feel. Is it typical for a husband to make his wife feel like a stranger in her own home? To belittle her efforts, to compare her to others, to make her feel unworthy of love? These questions haunt me, swirling in my mind like a storm I can't escape. I've started to notice changes in myself, small but significant. I'm no longer the optimistic, eager person I once was. I've grown quieter, more hesitant, as though I'm afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. My confidence, once a steady flame, now flickers uncertainly. I find myself second-guessing every decision, wondering if I'm the one who's at fault. Am I expecting too much? Am I being ungrateful? And yet, there is a small, stubborn part of me that refuses to believe this is all there is. That part of me remembers the dreams I had before marriage, the person I wanted to become. It reminds me that I am worth more than this, that I deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. It's this part of me that keeps me going, that pushes me to study harder, to plan for a future where I can finally break free from this cycle of dependence and doubt. I've started imagining what that future might look like. A life where I can make my own choices, where I don't have to justify every expense or prove my worth to someone who doesn't see it. A life where I can rediscover the person I used to be, the person I've lost in the shadow of this marriage. It's a vision that fills me with equal parts hope and fear. Hope for what could be, and fear of what I might have to do to get there. The thought of leaving my husband terrifies me. I think about the judgment I would face from my family, from my community, from people who would see my decision as a failure rather than an act of courage. I think about the promises I made on our wedding day, the vows that now feel so far removed from the reality of our life together. And yet, I can't ignore the voice inside me that whispers, "You deserve better." For now, I feel stuck. Stuck between the life I have and the life I want. Stuck between the expectations of others and the truth of my own heart. I know that I can't stay in this limbo forever, that eventually, I will have to make a choice. But until that day comes, I keep moving forward, one step at a time, holding on to the hope that things will change. I've started seeking advice, hoping to find some clarity in the words of others. For the men, is this behavior typical? Do husbands often act this way, or am I right to feel like something is missing? For anyone, how should I handle this situation? I want to believe that there's a way to salvage this marriage, to find happiness within it. But if that's not possible, how do I find the strength to let go? These are the questions I carry with me, unanswered but ever present. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I can't keep living like this forever. One day, I will find my voice again. One day, I will take control of my life. And when that day comes, I hope I will finally feel free.